Here we go. So my presentation today is called A Place to Express Yourself, a hands-on experience in performance-based music therapy practices. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first so you know where I'm coming from, and then we will get started. So we only have about 30 minutes today, so I may talk fast at times, but if you have questions, please put them in the comment box, and we have a few moderators at the end that will help me to answer as many questions as I can. So a little bit about me and why I'm doing this presentation today. I'm Jordan. I'm the president of the Midwest Region of Students. I studied at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri. And then I went off to my internship at a place called A Place to Be, which is in Middleburg, Virginia. After my internship, I became board certified and I decided to stay at A Place to Be. So A Place to Be has 3 different kinds of internship programs and therapists here. We have direct services, we have performance-based music therapy and community outreach, and we have medical music therapy. So I really got to experience a lot of that in my internship, and I fell in love with the idea of performance-based music therapy. I fell in love with it because growing up, performance is what I did. When I was little and people asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I was like, well, I want to be on Broadway when I was like 4 years old. Does a 4-year-old know what Broadway is? Probably not, but I did. So I grew up in the performance world. I grew up with theater. And when I came to A Place to Be and learned that I could take this passion that I have and that I grew up with and I can use it to help other people, I knew that I was in the right place. Or like I like to say here, I knew I was at a place to be. Anyways, sorry, I'm very punny and I will probably crack jokes this entire time. I want to talk a little bit about the things we're going to be learning today. So these are some learning points. We have a working definition of performance-based music therapy and exploring what that means in the clinical, objective, and subjective world. We're going to talk about different kinds of performance. We're going to talk about how do we take performance-based music therapy and view it objectively and get good, hard data that is evidence-based to prove what we're doing. And then throughout the whole journey of our presentation, I'm going to give you some narrative reports about hands-on experiences that I've had. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have time for questions so that you guys can get to know what you want to know about performance-based music therapy and any other questions you might have that arise during this presentation. So we're going to get started now. We're going to start with, okay, what is performance-based music therapy? So performance-based music therapy, really broken down and really simple as an introduction, is this idea of using performance techniques that we have that you get through your education. You know, we have to perform in a forum of some sort. When you're in college, you have to perform in juries. So we take that knowledge that we know and we add it to our knowledge of music therapy and our evidence-based practice of music therapy and working on non-musical goals. So as we continue this presentation, I'm going to build on this idea of what performance-based music therapy is, and hopefully by the end, you can start to understand it a little bit more. So we're going to start with a couple of different kinds of performance. So we're going to start with the most obvious kind, which is on-stage performance. That is what most people think of when they think of performance, is being on stage, maybe in a group of people, or maybe just like this picture demonstrates, performing by yourself or with someone else. So that is the most basic kind of performance, and we'll talk in a little bit about what objectives we could be working on in a performance and why we decide to add this performance aspect to our therapy. Another kind of performance that I added a little bit later, because I didn't really think of it as performance before, but now I do because of COVID-19, is a live performance from a remote location. So performing live, you still get that same adrenaline rush, regardless of whether you see your audience or not. I can tell you when I was starting my presentation, I felt like I was really in front of a live audience, even though I can't see any of your faces right now. I was like, okay, here comes the adrenaline. I'm about to perform. I'm about to present. So our clients are getting that same satisfaction and that same performance experience from a live standpoint. Another kind of performance is pre-recorded performances. So you're still working towards a performance, but it's something that is pre-recorded. An example of this is I had a client, and I'll call them Client Y, and they were super anxious about COVID-19, and in our last session together before everything went online, they expressed their anxiety to me and decided that the best way for them to get over that anxiety is to share a message with everybody else in the world. So we took this idea and we learned a song about how we can stay healthy during COVID-19, and they felt a lot better for themselves learning the song and getting to sing it, but they got this extra performance aspect by having it posted online afterwards so that they went viral, and they got to have the satisfaction of performing without that audience feel. The last kind of performance and kind of thing that I do in performance-based music therapy is working towards performance. So this idea of working towards performance is sometimes even more important than the actual performance, because when we're working towards performance, we're working on different skills that we can then generalize into our everyday lives. So we're working on our organizational skills by rehearsing and designating rehearsal times for ourselves. And we're working on the anxieties and the stresses that you may feel leading up to a performance, but in a safe space. So let's say I'm feeling really, really anxious about performing in a recital, but I have a therapist with me that's helping me work through these anxieties that can then maybe talk about, oh, I also feel anxious when I'm on my way to school. And I also feel anxious when I'm in a class and I have to talk to a friend. And we can take these coping skills and coping tools that we learn from practicing and going towards performance and generalize them into our everyday lives. Okay, so next up, we know a little bit more about different ways you can utilize performance, but we need to talk about how to do it objectively because, and I'm going to probably say this 100 times in my presentation, and you can count if you want. The most important thing about our practice as music therapists is that we need to be evidence-based. In order for us to be considered a real profession in the health world, we need to have evidence to back up what we say. It's great to have subjective evidence and to have these narrative reports and these beautiful stories, and that's such a core part of music therapy. But another core part is having this objective data that is measurable that we can grab onto and be like, yeah, here's the data that shows what I'm doing is working, okay? So that's why in music therapy, we create our individual goals and objectives. So on this slide, I have a few working outlines and skeletons for goals and objectives. So to improve organizational skills is a goal that we could be working on, and a skeleton of an objective is the clients working on scheduling practice and rehearsal sessions. We can work on increasing psychosocial skills and having clients identify nuances in different characters and roles that they're embodying that they may not be able to understand or feel when they're acting as themselves. They can also be working on awareness of others. So maybe someone's working on some social skills and being able to acknowledge and converse with others, and it's really, really hard to do when you don't have a script. But if you have a script set out for you and there's another person on stage that also has a script, you can learn how to have a conversation with someone that way. We're also improving public speaking skills. So having public speaking skills is a really important point in living your life, because at multiple times throughout a person's life, you're going to have to get up and you're going to have to talk to someone. Maybe you're presenting at Midwest Regional Conference, or maybe you're at school and in order to get a good grade in your class, you have to be able to present the PowerPoint and compare and contrast different kinds of shoes. But with all of this stuff on the screen, I have a very important question for you, and I'm going to look to the comments to see if anybody has the answer. So when creating individualized goals and objectives, what is the most important part? I can't actually look at the comments, so because I'm on presenter view. So Naomi, can you tell me one of the answers?
Client needs. And
client needs, that is very important. What else?
Non-musical goals.
Non-musical goals, yes. What else is really important?
The objectives are clear and measurable.
Yes, that is the word I was looking for. So the most important thing when we are creating individualized goals and objectives, they have to be measurable. So if this skeleton of an objective is not a real objective, because there is no measurable aspect in any of these objective skeletons that I wrote. So we're going to move on to the next slide to talk about how do we make this kind of stuff measurable. So here are some more examples of skeletons and then different goals and objectives that a client could be working on. But I'm going to give a little bit of an example on how we can turn this into an actual measurable objective that a music therapist could be tracking. So let's say I'm working with a client, and this client will be client N, and we've been working together for a while, and we're working on self-expression. So in our sessions every week, this client, they have a diagnosis of ASD and not a big emotional vocabulary at all. And with the emotional vocabulary lack, there's also not a lot of emotional regulation and emotional expression going on. So in order to express ourselves, we need to understand emotions. And sometimes our clients don't understand them. And that is something that happens with people that have ASD sometimes. So we're working in our sessions, and a lot of our goals are involved in like building our emotional vocabulary. What are the words of it? What does it feel like to feel certain things? And like, how do we know when someone else feels that way? Like, what are nonverbal cues that we could be getting? So in a performance-based track, maybe we're working on all of these things and we're leading up to a performance where the client is going to perform a song that has an emotion attached to it. So we pick out an emotion in our session. Let's say they picked sadness, and we went a step further and we picked a song that they think sounds really sad, and we've dissected and we've talked about that. So maybe a measurable objective that I'm taking throughout this process and throughout our sessions leading up to a performance is utilizing performance-based practice. Client will express the emotion sadness on their face 3 times within a 5-minute song. So we have our goal. Our goal is that we're improving our self-expression, and they're doing this 3 times in a song by showing sadness on their face. So that's very, very measurable. Every time we practice this song and every time we do this, I can take data on how many times they are able to express sadness in their face. And then over the long term, I have this great data on did they improve? Did this lead up to a performance, and practicing this song that had an emotion attached to it, did it increase their ability to show sadness in their face? And then taking it a step further, after all of that, are they able to express what sadness really means and what these emotions really mean?